Hey guys, how's it going? It's Danconia and welcome back to the Overwatch League Roundup 2020 Countdown Cup APAC preview. So, yesterday we took a look at the North American region in the Countdown Cup and how that might perhaps turn out with some changes at the Dallas Fuel and such and such. We've got three very, should we say, top teams in NA, and it might turn out that it's a tussle between those three once again. But I recommend checking out that video if you didn't already. Today we're going to take a look at Asia though, because we have two regions in the Overwatch League. We have 7 teams in Asia: London Spitfire, Chengdu Hunters, Seoul Dynasty, Hangzhou Spark, New York Excelsior, Guangzhou Charge and Shanghai Dragons. And they are going to compete it out to be champion of Asia once more in this final tournament before the end of the season. So, this can have a big impact on your seeding for the overall playoffs actually. Because, you know, you get wins on the board if you can get far in these tournaments. So everything really does count. When we look at this bracket, we're going to have the first match on Saturday, August the 8th at 9 AM. It's going to be the London Spitfire taking on the Chengdu Hunters. So, the top seed in this competition, the Shanghai Dragons, they're going to buy into the semi-final round. So Chengdu Hunters are the top seed at this stage of the competition, coming in at that second seed. They have had a fantastic July, going 3-0 during this month, including some miraculous wins over the likes of New York Excelsior, which no one really quite expected. The meta in the first 2 weeks of that month really favoured them, where Ball came into the meta, which meant a main could pop off. Jinmu's looking fantastic on the Genji, which is still meta by the way, and Late Young can come in on the Zarya. But we didn't see Chengdu Hunters in the week where we haven't had hero pools this month, so we haven't had a definite look at the Chengdu Hunters outside of that meta, which is something I have reservations about. But they are taking on the London Spitfire. London Spitfire come into this as the number 6 seed. They are just above the Seoul Dynasty. They're both winless teams this month. London Spitfire had an atrocious display against the Hangzhou Spark. It started off close and then they just couldn't compete. They were way too passive, and it really didn't look that good. Now, London looked good when they played against Shanghai earlier this month, where they took them to a 5-map set when they played the Ball Zarya, something that Chengdu Hunters are very proficient with, as we know. The interesting thing will be the decision of the teams in terms of what they run during this match. I have a feeling Chengdu Hunters are going to try and force this Ball Zarya comp, which could be interesting, could get them results, especially against a team like London Spitfire. I would expect London Spitfire to force Orisa Sigma. So this means a very big clash in styles. And if this was a team like Shanghai Dragons or New York Excelsior, I would say that the Orisa Sigma comp would come out on top. It's very anti-dive, and I think it's pretty good. But I have my doubts about London Spitfire in this one, because of their poor performances recently. Plus, when you look at the Spitfire DPS, they've got decent Genji players, they've got decent hit scan players, but so have Chengdu Hunters. And honestly, I think Jinmu is going to be the better Genji. I think we all know that, and I'm expecting Genji to heavily feature during this during the Countdown Cup. So Chengdu are going to be, it's tough to call. And London, I mean, every time London have played the Chengdu Hunters this year, they have 3-0'd them. They have not lost against Chengdu. So that is on London's side, but what it isn't on London's side is this sort of lingering meta of this Ball Zarya or the Winston Zarya, which really does fall into the favour of the Chengdu Hunters. You can put Yveltal on the Mercy, although I expect the Mercy to be used less considering Anna's now available. Then we can see Late Young on the Zarya, we're going to see Jinmu on the Genji, and obviously Leave is a very capable hit scan DPS probably on that Ashe, and I don't know where the advantages come for London Spitfire. It may come in the off-tank role, but it certainly doesn't come in the main tank, because I'm expecting London Spitfire to fill JMac, and well, yeah, no, we all know about JMac. Something that could actually swing this in London's favour is the fact that they could play Jihan, who has a very capable Hammond, as we know against Shanghai Dragons, but also back when they 3-0'd the Hangzhou Spark just before the Summer Showdown, they played Jihan on Orisa, and he had a more aggressive style. London knew when to go in, and they seemed a lot more comfortable. So it could be ultimately down to London coaching decisions. it's going to be an interesting one, but I will go for a 3-1 victory for the Chengdu Hunters here. I think they may have enough to see off London Spitfire, but the other match that they would have to face might be an entirely different prospect. At 11 AM, we will see the Seoul Dynasty take on Hangzhou Spark. Again, Hangzhou Spark come in as our number 3 seed, Seoul Dynasty as our number 7 seed. And this is interesting because Hangzhou, they've looked good, but they've also looked inconsistent. Seoul Dynasty, they've looked trash in the regular season, but when it comes to tournaments, they can turn up. Until they get to someone like the Shanghai Dragons, which they have at both tournaments and lost to them. So, I think this match will be pretty close. I think the Hangzhou Spark will give it a good go, but I also think Seoul Dynasty are going to turn up. It's a frustrating thing about the Seoul Dynasty, but they tend to do that during these tournaments. So, if I was to hazard a guess at this scoreline, I would go 3-1 for the Seoul Dynasty, maybe a 3-2. But I think Seoul Dynasty will get a win. And that would mean we would see a matchup between Seoul Dynasty and Chengdu Hunters a little bit later on, but we'll talk about that in a minute. At 1 PM, we will see the New York Excelsior taking on the Guangzhou Charge. New York Excelsior got a very impressive win over the Guangzhou Charge the other week. Very impressive. New York have looked much more stable with Bianca in the off-tank role instead of Hotbar. Guangzhou, it hasn't been as smooth sailing as it had been previously. I think this is a win for the New York Excelsior somehow. I really, really do. I think the wind has been taken out of the Guangzhou Charge sails slightly. They don't have anything else to compete for the rest of this regular season. They will not feature in the 2 weeks after this Countdown Cup. Their season is over. So there is that caveat to things. Guangzhou Charge, turn up in this tournament or you wait until playoffs. As simple as that. So, Guangzhou Charge, it's now or never if you want to put any more wins on that board. That's all I'm saying for the Guangzhou Charge. New York, they've got some matches after this Countdown Cup. Also, they've got one against London. I know that for sure. But I think New York will have too much here. So I'm going to go for a 3-1 victory for the New York Excelsior. Maybe a 3-2. Actually, I think it's going to be close. I think it's going to be a 3-2. But at 9 AM, we will see the first semi-final. This will be the winner of the New York Excelsior and the Guangzhou Charge taking on the Shanghai Dragons. Now, with what I predicted, that would be New York Excelsior taking on the Shanghai Dragons, which should be one hell of a match. I know in the regular season, a couple of weeks ago, or last week, I can't remember which one it was, the Shanghai Dragons got a fairly comfortable 3-1 victory over the Excelsior. But times can change, and when you're in tournament conditions, things can be vastly different. Vastly different. The only caveat to that is the Excelsior. They are known to, well, I don't say not perform at their best, but not perform at their peak in tournament conditions. So there is that problem for the Excelsior. I still expect Shanghai Dragons to beat whoever they face, whether it be Excelsior or Guangzhou Charge, and move on to the final. And at 11 AM on the Sunday, we will see the other semi-final. So this will be the London Spitfire or the Chengdu Hunters taking on the Seoul Dynasty or the Hangzhou Spark. So, the way I've predicted it, that would be Chengdu Hunters taking on the Seoul Dynasty. Now, this is, again, heavily meta dependent. I think if Chengdu start forcing teams into this Bulls area, or something similar, Chengdu will get a lot of joy with that comp, and they will get a lot of wins. Now, if these teams like London, Seoul, Hangzhou, whoever Chengdu take on, if they stick to their guns, play an anti-dive sort of comp, I think Chengdu will start to sink in the mud slightly, or sink in the sand, I should say. And I have a lot of question marks over Chengdu. That's what I'm saying. I know Chengdu have been great in the 2 weeks we've seen them this month, or last month, but I have a lot of questions over whether that can be sustained outside of the meta that we were in back then, which we are not in anymore. It is back to Orisa Sigma mostly on the main tank, on the tanks. So that is where Chengdu could fall. I think Seoul Dynasty, if they went up against the Chengdu Hunters, will scrape out a win. I don't think they will lose like they did in the regular season. But I think it might be close. I think Chengdu will give it a good go. But I would say 3-1 for the Seoul Dynasty. Now, if it was Hangzhou Spark, if it was Hangzhou Spark, I think Chengdu have an upset potential there. So I would go for 3-2 for the Chengdu Hunters if it was Hangzhou Spark. Now on the flip coin, if it was London Spitfire going through, they're saying they beat the Chengdu Hunters. I think London lose to both teams. To be quite honest with you, I don't think they've got enough. London are very good at concentrating on one match during a weekend and say, right, we're going to put all of our resources into it. We're going to be really good during this match, blah, 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 blah. except the Hangzhou Spark match last weekend. But when we saw it in action against Shanghai. But when they've got to kind of adjust in game and kind of prepare on the fly, have not much preparation time, it gets difficult for the Spitfire, I think. It's it's a team that's very reliant on coaching, and I think it's where they will falter. So if London do get past Chengdu, I think they will get halted by Seoul Dynasty or Hangzhou Spark in a 3-1 fashion or so. But that means a final where we probably see Shanghai, and then they would take on one of those 4 teams. I still think Shanghai are the best team in this region. So if you want me to predict it, whoever makes it to that final, I still think Shanghai win. That's what I say. I think Shanghai are quite clearly the best team in this region. I don't think it's close like it is in North America, where you've got Paris Eternal, San Francisco Shock, Philadelphia Fusion battling it out. You've got some teams nippling at the heels like Florida and Atlanta. I don't think it's like that in APAC. There is a clear dominant team, and it is the Shanghai Dragons, and then we have the rest that are trying to catch up to them. The closest are New York, maybe Guangzhou, depending on how they do during this tournament. But I don't know. I might be wrong. I would like to see 3 different winners in APAC. We saw Shanghai in the first one. We saw Guangzhou in the second one. So if we saw a different winner this time, it would mean a New York Excelsior, Hangzhou Spark, Seoul Dynasty, Chengdu Hunters, or London Spitfire, and take your pick out of those. I think it would be very big for the New York Excelsior to get a win. I'm not going to lie. I think it would be pretty massive if New York Excelsior win this. But yeah, I can't look past Shanghai for this region. But that is the preview for the APAC region going into this weekend. It's going to be a really interesting match, really interesting weekend of Overwatch across NA and APAC. And it is the final tournament, so make the most of it, because you will not see this format until we go back to the playoffs, which will be not all that soon. It'll be September at least before you see playoffs. And yeah, enjoy some really good Overwatch, I hope. We don't want any 3-0s. We don't want 3 Overwatch. We want close matches. We want people to tussle. We want really close nail biters like the Valiant versus the Houston Outlaws last weekend. But for now, thank you guys so much for watching this video. If you liked it, give it a like, subscribe if you're new, and I'll see you in the next video. See you then.